This video is brought to you by Keeps. What's up guys, Michael here. The last couple of years have taught us a lot, like the value of social ties and community, and the value of leading with spear. But mostly, we've learned how absolutely inextricable technology is from our daily lives. And if one Harvard dropout has his way, the boundary between our physical and digital selves is only going to get blurrier. In short, our future looks and feels more like science fiction than ever before. Maybe that's not so surprising. The most powerful people in tech, from the co-founders of Google to Elon Musk, invariably cite famous works of sci-fi as formative influences. And while sci-fi has its fair share of cool lasers and sleek hairdos, it's also uniquely positioned to explore big ideas. So what happens when these big ideas influence the rich and powerful? Well, let's find out in this Wisecrack Edition how tech bros get sci-fi so wrong. Oh, and spoilers ahead for a few great works of sci-fi and the future of humanity. But before we get into it, I want to tell you about this week's sponsor, Keeps. Keeps makes it easier and more affordable for guys to prevent hair loss. And since 2 out of 3 men will experience hair loss in some form by the time they're 35, Keeps is relevant to a lot of people out there. But with their subscription service, you can fight back and hang on to the locks you've got. The Keeps process begins with a free consultation with a licensed Keeps doctor who can help decide which combination of FDA-approved prescriptions and over-the-counter medications are right for you. These medications will arrive at your doorstep every 3 months, so you don't have to leave your house to pick up refills. As your treatment plan goes on, you can message your Keeps doctor 24/7 to update them on your progress and to ask any questions you may have. But here's one question we can answer right off the bat. While individual results may vary, it typically takes between 4 and 6 months to start seeing results. If you're ready to take action and prevent hair loss, go to keeps.com/wisecrack or click the link in the description to receive 50% off your first order. That's keeps.com/wisecrack. Now, back to the show. Sci-fi has always inspired real-world tech. What's arguably the first sci-fi movie, Fritz Lang's 1929 film Woman in the Moon, helped humanity add spaceflight to its to-do list. Rocketry pioneer Hermann Oberth consulted with Lang to envision the space shuttle, bringing in ideas like multi-stage rockets and the takeoff countdown that, for both practical and aesthetic reasons, have become foundational to space travel. The movie was also beloved by America's pet Nazi, Wernher von Braun, who went on to design the Apollo spacecraft. In the wider view, countless figures across science, tech, and industry, including Edwin Hubble, cite early sci-fi novelist Jules Verne as a key inspiration. One of the Apollo 8 astronauts, Frank Borman, even went so far as to say that in a very real sense, Jules Verne is one of the pioneers of the space age. Today's technologists are no different. They invariably cite both classic and contemporary sci-fi as formative inspirations. Much of Silicon Valley treats the Neal Stephenson novel Snow Crash as some kind of holy text. That includes Mark Zuckerberg, who apparently made it required reading for new recruits. Elon Musk says that Isaac Asimov's foundation was key to his founding SpaceX, and is open about his love of Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series. And Peter Thiel has described his vision of the future as uniquely inspired by sci-fi writer Robert A. Heinlein. It's no surprise that an industry dominated by nerds has some geeky shared interests. But while sci-fi is a wide genre, some works are invoked a lot more than others. In addition to the aforementioned Foundation series and Snow Crash, Star Trek rounds out the big 3. Perhaps more so than any other work, Snow Crash has wielded incredible influence over Silicon Valley. Everyone who's anyone in tech has named it as a big inspiration, from Google co-founders Sergey Brin and Larry Page to Peter Thiel and perhaps most fatefully, Mark Zuckerberg. It's easy to see why they're all so keen on it. A key part of the novel's world is the Metaverse, a sort of digital Wild West where coders and techies reign supreme. With just a VR headset and a steady internet connection, people can live almost entirely in the Metaverse, coming out only for short periods to do dumb shit like eat and learn their children's names. And if people like the Zuck get their way, the Metaverse will soon become a thing we can't ignore. He even changed his company's name to Meta to show just how committed he is. And game platforms like Fortnite and Roblox are both inspired by and trying to manifest their own versions of the Metaverse. Then there's Foundation, which Elon Musk in particular has lauded. calling it fundamental to the creation of SpaceX. The TLDR foundation is one big brain man is so good at math that he can accurately predict the future. He discovers that the galactic empire is doomed, so he takes a bunch of the best scientists to another planet to build a new empire, a scientific meritocracy. The series is rooted in that old chestnut, American exceptionalism, which, as your 7th grade social studies teacher told you, it basically just means America is uniquely great. This notion especially took off after World War II, where America established its dominance. In its early chapters, Foundation seems to endorse this view. But Asimov wrote the Foundation series over a long period, with a nearly 3-decade gap in the middle, and the core ideas he communicated changed to reflect the times. By the end of the series, Foundation had challenged the post-war ideas at its core, exploring the follies of imperialism and exceptionalism within the context of the Second Galactic Empire. Basically, the protagonist's initial goal of single-handedly starting this new world is sharply critiqued. In fact, Asimov made it well known that he based the overall arc of the series on the history of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. But the big boys of Silicon Valley also have some more mainstream sci-fi interests. Take Star Trek. We probably don't need to explain this classic to you, with its utopian federation of planets and exploration of complex social and philosophical issues. It's a series defined by its idealism and total standing of justice and equality. People who worked with Steve Jobs named his ability to push you to do seemingly impossible things his reality distortion field, a term straight out of the Trek. And real-life Scrooge McDuck Jeff Bezos has been outspoken about the influence that the show has had on him. He almost named Amazon MakeItSo.com after Picard's famous catchphrase.
Make it so.
And the complex voice-controlled computers of the Enterprise were a direct inspiration for Alexa. Perhaps most tellingly, Bezos ended his high school valedictorian speech with a Star Trek quote. He said, "Space, the final frontier. Meet me there." Bezos also tacitly forced William Shatner to look at his childhood Trek fan art. Billionaires, they're just as embarrassing as us. So we've established the enormous influence sci-fi has had on Silicon Valley. And hey, in some ways, knowing that these people enjoy the genre is kind of cool. And when some of the most powerful people in the world are sci-fi nerds, it's going to have an impact on the culture. But even if they share the interest of the hoi polloi, their lives are so radically different from ours that they may be taking away something totally different from our shared sci-fi phase. Let's go back to Snow Crash, which is set in a real-world dystopia. Everyone lives in burbclaves, which are described as a city-state with its own constitution, a border, laws, cops, everything. Everything within these burbclaves has been corporatized, including the law, meaning that big corporations can legally kill you for minor criminal infractions. So if you work for, say, Amazon, you would likely live in the Amazon burbclave. In the world of Snow Crash, corporations basically have full control over government and society. Not that this could ever happen in our world. And this has forced those seeking freedom into the Metaverse, a place free from corporate control. It's essentially an anarchist technocracy, and the only boundaries are set by the technology you have access to. This is where companies like Meta miss the point, because even if other companies contribute to the Metaverse, Meta is always going to have more control. If they host the servers, if their infrastructure is what it's built upon, then the Metaverse will never be free from corporate oversight. Meta isn't going to allow anyone with enough coding chops to mess around with the source code because the company has invested time, money, and brainpower into its design. The Metaverse of Zuckerberg's dream is one that's been divided up into multiple corporate-controlled walled gardens, each with their own terms of service and currencies. This ironically resembles the hellish corporate reality of Snow Crash more than its anarchist digital metaverse. Here, a tech billionaire with the unique ability to turn a sci-fi vision into reality seems to have missed the critique at the heart of that fictional vision. And this isn't the only example of a tech bro missing some vital points from their favorite content. Take Foundation. When Musk talks about escaping climate change by moving humanity to Mars, a feat that only he is brave or willing enough to undertake, it's easy to see the connection. Musk gets to step into the role of the big brain man who anticipates our doom and works as a private entity to solve the problem. But in being the man who built and therefore owns and operates his proposed Martian colony, Musk also takes the role of the head of the meritocracy. He contributed the most, so he's in charge. However, in painfully ironic news, That's the very concept that the Foundation series explicitly disavows. But in Musk's fantasy, he is the exceptional man with both an idea and the scientific know-how to realize it. Every launch that SpaceX undertakes has the underlying goal of building towards Mars colonization. But a one-man-led colonization mission in Foundation isn't the solution. It's a recipe for social collapse. So not exactly something the average tech billionaire should be looking to imitate, right? But we do have one tech bro whose role model is objectively a pretty good guy and a true bald king. Jeff Bezos is such a big trekker that he says he idolizes Enterprise Captain Jean-Luc Picard, which is interesting because Picard is defined by his strong sense of ethics and morals, arguably even more than other captains in the series. Whereas Kirk is brash and headstrong, Picard is measured and deliberate. Kirk will make mistakes and do the right thing eventually, while Picard will agonize over the decision to avoid making the mistake in the first place. Now, we're not claiming that Bezos doesn't consider all his options before making a decision. You don't get to be a big-time capitalist baron without thinking things through. But there is a disconnect between the example that Picard sets and Bezos' public-facing actions. Here's a couple of Picard quotes to show what we mean. In First Contact, he says,
"The acquisition of wealth is no longer the driving force in our lives. We work to better ourselves and the rest of humanity."
In Next Generation, he says,
"First time any man's freedom is trodden on, we're all damaged."
And also in Next Generation,
I have to weigh the good of the many against the needs of the individual and try to balance them as realistically as possible.
these aren't outliers. They all demonstrate Picard's fundamental character. He's all about altruism and bettering mankind at large. In contrast, Jeff Bezos has a literally unspendable amount of personal wealth, which he keeps adding to.
It was fine being the second wealthiest person in the world. That actually worked fine.
And Amazon has roundly been exposed for exploiting workers. Regardless of your stance on those issues and whether or not you agree with Picard, Bezos' actions are clearly contradictory to the fictional man he idolizes. If Picard were real and he met Bezos, it's clear he'd bar his application to the Federation. So who cares if figures like Musk, Zuckerberg, and Bezos are big ol' sci-fi nerds with poor critical reading skills? Honestly, everybody should, due to their outsized influence on government and society. This implication is especially stark when you compare the wealth of these heads of big tech to, say, national space agencies like NASA, which are vastly underfunded. So our forays into the galaxy are yoked into a billionaire space race that's enmeshed with the egos of the bros involved. What's more, big tech has a ridiculous amount of money to spend on lobbying, tailoring legislation to best suit their needs, arguably at the expense of everybody else. Zuckerberg and Meta are already trying to colonize the internet in developing nations, transforming it into some VR-driven, hyper-monetized corpo land that would fundamentally change how we interact with one another. Digital platforms have become a key aspect of our social interactions, and the people in charge of them have relative freedom to do whatever they want. Zuckerberg and the Metaverse, Musk and his Mars colonies, Bezos and wearing cowboy hats. They're all billionaire passion projects that either are or have the potential to fundamentally change reality for all of us in ways both tangible and conceptual. Driven by their love for, but perhaps not coherent understanding of sci-fi, these platforms are shaping the world we live in and what we imagine the future could look like. With so much at stake, perhaps it's no wonder that William Gibson, one of the most prophetic sci-fi authors of all time, once said that he has explicitly decided not to write certain ideas into his books because he worried that they'd be misunderstood and possibly imitated. And who are we to not listen to the wisdom of the original cyberpunk? But what do you guys think? Apart from using antitrust laws to break up tech monopolies, making them pay their taxes, and revoking all of their library cards, is there anything that can be done? Should we do anything at all, or are they free to take what they want from sci-fi and throw away what doesn't suit? Let us know what you think in the comments. Big thanks to our patrons, and be sure to check out our podcast. Hit that subscribe button like you're hitting the emergency power-off switch at the Metaverse, and don't forget to ring that bell. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in space.